Alright, so yeah, I get into Buenos Aires, and my brother had to borrow like $2,000 from me suddenly, cause to like for rolfing school, so I didn't have any money or much money left, and so I decided I would teach English there, but that was a really bad idea, and I was even advised against it by a couple of people because they were having money problems. This was in October, beginning I think of October of 2001. And I guess what happened with Argentina is they like defaulted on all their loans from the IMF and they couldn't pay them back, so they decided, so they were like, I guess they had the guy in the 80s like thought it would be smart to peg the peso to the dollar, which made Argentina really expensive, so they couldn't really export all of their beef and stuff. So, I mean, I'm not an economist, this is just, I didn't even read anything, this is just from what I understand, and so there was like no work. So I go there and I did get the impression, I was there 2 months teaching English, kind of part-time-ish. Got this like cheap hotel place and a room there, and I rode my bike, you know, to my classes and stuff, and I would have like conversation classes with the students, and they would say that like, yeah, how Argentina was like not doing well. Like, I guess like one of them said in the 60s, Argentina was the 6th most developed country in the world. That was the time of like the Perones. And it did look like, the infrastructure wise, it looked like, you know, in the 60s it would have been like one of the great cities. It looked just like Paris. All the buildings were like whitewashed and lots of like classic looking buildings, you know, like old ancient Roman, like the US Capitol, like those big columns and stuff, and lots of big buildings like that, and big wide avenues and 2 crisscrossing pedestrian malls. It was a pretty city like that. Only problem is, even though it was right up next to the ocean, officially a river, but you can't see the other side, so it's like an ocean, but they were stupid and they put docks there instead, so you might as well not be next to the ocean. In order to see the water, you have to like ride your bike way out on some peninsula there, and then there's this like rocky beach. But and that was a really popular trail. It was fun. It was really crowded and was there. And there was one little river that flowed down, but there was no like social scene. There was La Boca, which is an interesting place. All the different like buildings and houses were different, painted different colors, and I guess that originally happened from when they were poor and they didn't have enough money to like buy lots of paint, so they would just use whatever paint they had, and then that became the tradition to just have different colored houses there. But that was right up next to like kind of like a little river that went down. It was kind of pretty. But yeah, they were generally, it was cheap. Movies were cheap and stuff there, and food was really good and cheap and kind of cheap. But it was still kind of expensive when I was there. I got a job teaching English, but I worked there 2 months teaching English, and I ended up never getting paid at all for it. It was all for free. The institute I got a job with, I mean, I knew that they were going to pay me late at least, because I was hanging out with some girls at some bar, and they're saying that they always do that so that they can like hang on to the money and then make interest off of it. But yeah, I shouldn't have worked the second month when they couldn't pay me the first month. I don't know if they originally intended on paying me or if they just couldn't. One of my students said that he couldn't even pay his maid because they made this law to try to keep people from taking all of their money out of the bank because everybody was expecting a devaluation. That you could only take like $250 out a month. So this guy couldn't pay his maid because she usually got paid in cash. And I mean, that's probably how my institute would have had to pay me, but they told me that I would have to do this and that, you know, and like it was obvious when I first got hired that it wasn't legal anyways, so they kind of screwed me over. But anyways, it's a really big city in terms of size. I hung out with some of these Argentinians who I had met in La Paz, did the climb that mountain with, who were there at the time. And I also had a girlfriend, was a tango dancer, who was a street tango dancer who danced with her friend, her female friend. And like when she came up to ask me for money, I gave her $1, and I was like waving it around so she would see, but she didn't even look at the dollar. She was just like looking at me, and like she was like, "Oh wow." So she was like, yeah, you teach me English, I teach you how to tango. So we had one class, but then she like was my girlfriend. We went out to she took me to some like tango place where they all dance tango. And it's kind of weird, it kind of freaked me out because it's like going back in time 100 years. Like they play this like really kind of weird music, like violin music, like and then they'll dance. It's kind of like being on the Titanic or something. And they took it really seriously. Like I'd get out there and try and dance with her, and I didn't really know the steps, and like people were like booing me, and so I had to like sit down. I wasn't allowed to dance anymore. Like they take that really seriously. And I went to like half a dozen different places or something with this girl, and every place it was the same people. It was like the tango crowd. Like that's what they did. It's kind of like you have some people who are like on say they go to all the like bike racing events or something, or they go all to like kickboxing events, and they all know each other. Well, and that was like the tango crowd. But there were some interesting people. I talked to some interesting people, cool people. Argentinians are pretty good at English. This girl wasn't though. But so yeah, I was there, and oh, and I didn't. I was my Argentinian friend told me about. He hooked me up with a big old bag of weed, so I was like stoned the whole time I was there too. And I was going to the gym too, kind of regularly. All high. That was fun. I had 3 bikes stolen in 3 weeks though. My first one, the lock was cut and it was parked right in front of my house, so I couldn't lock it in front of my house anymore. And then another one, I was really high and I actually accidentally locked my bike to this metal thing that was like didn't have a that wasn't high. I didn't lock it to the tree. I locked it, so all they had to do was pick the bike up. So they did that, and I was only locked up for like 10 minutes when I went on to get something to eat. So there were lots of, I guess, desperation and stuff there. Yeah, and then you could tell that the people were really, really stressed out because I would try to ask people in the pedestrian mall just like simple questions like, "Excuse me, do you know where this place is?" And nobody wanted to even have anything to do with me. They just like growl at me and run off. I guess they thought I was asking for money or something. And they were like, yeah, really grumpy and angry. Yeah. And I remember I was there actually during the devaluation, and you in every single block, um, every single bank in the whole town, whole city, there were people standing in lines that went all the way around to the end of the block, and then halfway around the next side of the block, like 100-person lines, because they would all go there and try to take their money out. And I think my girlfriend said that she actually opened up. I guess from dancing on the street, she saved like $20,000 or something, and had to open up like 25 different bank accounts in order to take all as much money as she could out. And she ended up losing like $8,000 by the end of the devaluation. By the end of the devaluation, it was like 3.5 pesos to the dollar, and before it was like 1 peso to each dollar. So I was there the whole time. I was spending money. I was spending money when they were before the devaluation, when they were expensive, and I wasn't really standing there afterwards. So I got screwed, and I never got paid for anything that I did because I was hanging out a couple times with this English girl who was living with this other Argentinian girl because I guess at first they needed a roommate, but then they decided they didn't want me to live there because maybe I was a guy or something. But this English girl was like. She got work a lot easier than me though, because she's a girl. People like to talk to girls. But oops, I forgot what I was gonna say. But this girl, I mentioned to her about. It was funny. I mentioned to her about this Israeli girl who rode her bike off the road that I rode down to Corowico from La Paz, and this English girl was right behind her when it happened. She was with her. So that was pretty crazy, like small world. But Whoops, I'm out of time.